Hi, and welcome back to 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Sylvia.
And I'm Vivian. Welcome back.
So, I'm really excited about today's topic. We are going to talk about the art of failing. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, Vivian.
I feel the same. So let's jump in.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
One of the things that a lot of parents believe is that we need to protect. It comes very early, like when they're taking their first steps and you are walking behind them to make sure they don't fall. And it is in our mindset as parents to shelter, protect, and create an ideal situation for our kids. This episode is going to completely throw that out the window and discuss the benefits of letting our kids fail, how we can support our kids through that process, and what they can gain and learn from that.
Yeah, I think this is part of what makes parenting teens very difficult, is that there are ages when our children are young where so much of what we do really is protecting them from danger. And at some point, we have to transition in our mindset to allowing them to fail, maybe even encouraging them to fail as part of their development. And I think that's very, very hard for any parent to do.
Absolutely.
So, Sylvia, as we were talking about this topic, I was reminded that I read a book on this called The Gift of Failure. It's written by a teacher. And what I love about the book, it's kind of similar to our idea on this podcast. I mean, this is written by a woman who has been teaching for years. So she's looking at this not only through the scope of her experience with her children, but through the hundreds of kids that she sees year after year and the experiences that she sees through them. And I think similarly with us, we're looking through the lens of our experiences with our 10 children, but also the hundreds of patients that we have the privilege of interacting with. The general premise of the book and what we want to focus on in the first half of this podcast is this idea of the importance of letting them fail. That failure is actually very important in developing intrinsic motivation. You and I did not talk about that in our Inspiring Internal Drive, but I think it's a really good point that one way to inspire internal drive is that they're failing on their own and then they're going to self-correct and make change. And also encouraging that development of executive functioning for the idea of, as you're transitioning from middle school to teen to adulthood, the increasing responsibility and independence, all of those things that we associate with executive functioning, and how failing actually is very instrumental and informative in helping you self-correct and figure out how to navigate life effectively.
Yeah, the adage of you learn from your mistakes. When you make mistakes, that is oftentimes how you learn, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a quick story about this. I have an 8th grader right now, and for my younger kids, I will pack their lunch in the morning, but when they come home from school, they have to give me their lunchbox on the counter so it's ready to go the next day. And
Right.
this child in particular always forgets to give me his lunchbox. So in the morning when I don't have it, I just pull it out of the backpack and then I pack his lunch. And then the next time I see him, I'm like, hey, you forgot to give me your lunchbox. Remember to give me your lunchbox. But I'm continually reminding him. So I went to him and I was like, I just really feel convicted that I am doing you a disservice. You're supposed to give me your lunchbox and you continually forget. And I think at this point, I just need to stop. And if you forget, you're just going to take it to school without a lunch. And I just want you to know that when you're sitting there in the cafeteria and you have nothing to eat, I'm going to feel so sad. But I think I need to do this to teach you. And what he did was so remarkable to me. He pulled out his phone, set an alarm for 4:15 when he gets home from school, and was like, this will go off and I'll remember to give you my lunchbox. And it was this instant, oh my gosh, I really have been denying you accessing your own executive functioning of figuring out how to solve this problem by continually rescuing you.
I think you demonstrate a good point here, and I have a story to share as well. In 6th grade, my children start doing their own laundry. So in giving them some independence and agency with this, I really had to throw away my expectations
Oh,
as to
absolutely.
when they do their laundry,
Yeah.
right? But because it is now their responsibility and they maybe don't remember to, there is failure there. There is oh, where is my soccer jersey? Oh, it's dirty. They go to the game with a grass stained, wrinkled jersey, and every other parent on the team looks at my child like that. And it's like their failure is on display for everyone to see. And sometimes the judgment is it's my failure as well. Sure, it's hard for kids. It's also hard for parents to watch that failure and kind of be accountable for that in a way, right?
That's funny.
But yeah, all of this is a trade-off between executive functioning, having them initiate the chore,
Yeah.
what be it an
Yeah.
alarm that your child set, or my kids realizing that they have no clean clothes.
Yep.
I'm not the initiator. Your child is initiating, right?
Yes.
And that executive functioning requires some standing back and watching the failure. That logical consequence of failure is tough for us parents to
It,
like sit back and let that happen, right?
it is the missing your lunch or going to your sport with your uniform not washed. These are relatively minor consequences or quote unquote failures. I feel like a really difficult one at these ages is school and
Yeah.
grades. And I
Yeah.
love, in this book that I referenced, The Gift of Failure, and she's a teacher. She says, grades, there's no way around this unfortunate reality. So I'm just going to face it head on. Grades are extrinsic rewards for academic performance. Extrinsic rewards undermine motivation and long term learning. Ergo, grades undermine motivation and long term learning. There, elephant identified, right? And I feel that. I'm sure you felt that.
I think almost every high school parent child combo has been in conflict with this. Do I let my child execute and fail? Or
Yep.
I cannot let them fail in high school because there is so much on the line.
I fully agree. And we have to do what you and I have talked about is change the mindset at home. You're in this for the learning. We're going to let you fail because this is part of how you're going to learn how you best study and how you best learn material.
And I mean, this is definitely words of wisdoms, words to live by, but the execution of these words is still very difficult.
This has been an interesting discussion on this idea of the importance of letting them fail. I think we should actually transition to the idea of encouraging them to fail. So let's talk about this.
I can't wait.
What have you failed at today? So, this was a question that my husband would regularly pose to me and our children. And, maybe we would be sitting at dinner and it would be like, hey, everybody share your high and your low. And then the question would come up of, tell us about something you failed at recently. I credit this to my husband. Eric has an entrepreneurial side. And of course, in the business world, there's really an art to trying something, knowing it might fail, and then trying something else. I think we could also word that as being willing to take risk. Are you willing to go out of your comfort zone? And I think the heart of my husband asking that to our children regularly was this idea of wanting to encourage them, go out and take risks. Don't feel like you should only be doing things that you're good at. Go try new things. He wanted to develop in them a freedom to go try new things. And I have a couple examples of this in our family. So one example I have is I register my kids for summer swim league. And my kids are not swimmers. And oftentimes, especially as they got older, the summer swim league would have a lot of year-round swimmers on it. And my kids would complain to me that they were terrible at it. And I would say to them going into it, our goal with this is for you to be a good swimmer and to be able to utilize that skill for the rest of your life in whatever way you choose. Maybe you'll choose to swim as exercise. You're going to have the skills to do that. Maybe it'll just be for fun. And I would remind them, I'd be like, guys, it is so easy to go do things that you're good at.
Yeah.
If you limit yourself to only doing things that you're good at, you're missing out on all of these other things in life. Like this is really difficult to put yourself in this position.
We've had similar experiences where we want the kids to learn the benefit of doing things, whether or not it's personal enjoyment, whether or not it makes them physically fit, not just choosing what they do because they're good at it, because eventually almost every child that is good at something, the 4-year-old football star or the best cello player in 3rd grade, eventually, once you get to the high enough level, are they going to be Yo-Yo Ma? Will they swim like Michael Phelps? And pretty much the answer is no. So if you teach your child early on that we're just doing this because we're the best at it, you are feeding their self-esteem to say,
Yes.
I feel confident because I'm good at something. And you're not teaching them how to have independent self-esteem and motivation when they're not good at something. And I think this is often the trouble when kids reach that high school, young adult age when they are not the best at it. And their self-esteem has been built around this their entire lives. And now what? What I love about your story is there is more to it than just being good at it. It's having fun at the activity. It's getting proficient at a new skill.
Right.
We weren't a travel sport kind of family with so many children. Rec was where we were. When one of my sons entered college, he had been a long distance runner in high school. He befriended these runners in a collegiate community. He was surprised that these new friends and talented athletes did not play other sports for fun, like pickup basketball or swimming laps. They're collegiate runners. But the lack of skills that my child just knew how to do, because we were doing rec basketball, we were doing rec ice hockey, we were doing summer swim as well. And I feel like a lot of this is lost today, that
Mhm.
enjoyment of, hey, I just like playing basketball.
Right.
And
Right.
I didn't make my high school team, but hey, I still like doing that. I like doing that with my neighbors and friends.
I think part of that being willing to take risks and do things that you might fail at is helping develop a growth mindset, that's sometimes called, is expanding the things that you're good at by trying new things and spending time in them. I have another story about this, and that's that one of my children has played flag football and tackle football. And I remember early on in middle school, he said, I'm going to try out for quarterback. And I was like, you are? And he's like, yeah, I want to try out. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, you've never played quarterback. You're okay. And I was warning him, and he was like, that's okay. And he tried out for quarterback for one team, and he made quarterback for the B team, and they had a great year. He had so much fun doing it. And then the next year, he's playing tackle football, and he decides to try out for quarterback again, knowing it's a long shot. And he's like 5th string quarterback. And he's so happy because in his framework, he's getting all of this practice time at quarterback. He occasionally goes in on a play, usually just to hand off the ball as quarterback. And then he plays other positions on the side, and he's just seeing it as having a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
He had such a freedom
Yeah.
to take the risk and put himself out there. And I recognize that even as an adult, but certainly as a teen, I would have never done that
Yeah.
because I would have known I wasn't good enough. I would have felt that weight of I'm not good enough. I don't want to submit myself to failing. And he just has this complete freedom to
Yeah.
say, I want to try this. I'm going to. That may not work out. That's okay. And I feel like that is something my husband in particular has tried to instill in them, this idea of, what have you failed at? What are you
Yeah.
trying that's new that you're not going to be good at, that you may not be good at?
Yeah. I feel like putting yourself out there, trying something new, knowing that you're doing something that you might not quote unquote succeed at.
Right.
I think that it does help with a child's self-esteem. It's a little counterintuitive, I think, when
Yes.
you think about it initially. They're failing at things. How can that build their self-esteem? But when a child or a teenager is so afraid
Hmm.
of failure, that fear
Yeah.
of looking bad or being embarrassed, that is self-esteem shaping. That fear becomes dominant in their self-esteem. And when you teach them, hey, just try it, your expectations are low. It's good to be an underdog sometimes.
Hmm.
That can be very freeing, and it no longer defines them anymore. This is kind of what you're describing in that envy that you
Yes.
have for your child that's just going out for quarterback and having a good time. His self esteem is not riding on
The outcome.
the
Yes.
outcome and the decision of someone else.
Yes. Yes.
And we talk about empowerment a lot in when we talk about, raising children, and it can be empowering
Yeah.
that the reason why you're doing it is completely separate than the judgment of the coach, the judge, whatever. It's because you wanna be doing it, right?
Yes. Yes. I think another place that this comes up in counseling teenagers is relationships. And I remember this conversation that one of my college students was having with one of my high school students. And my college student was like, when you like somebody, romantically like somebody, I would recommend just tell them, hey, I'm interested in you. Would you like to get to know each other better? Because really, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, but then at least and it's resolved. And there's not this whole game of what are they thinking? Do they know that I like them, et cetera, et cetera. And I just loved hearing this explanation he was giving that was conveying such a willingness to fail, such a willingness to take this risk, because the worst that's going to happen is that it will fail. And then that allows it to be a stepping stone to move on to something else.
This brings to mind a story that I want to tell about one of my sons who, when he started high school and he was going to try out for soccer, he was a decent player. So he tried out and he wound up getting cut on the last day. And in our tryout schedule, he still had the ability the following day to go and try out for the cross country team. And so I mentioned it to him at that time, like, hey, sorry, buddy, you were cut, but you could still do cross country if you wanted to. And so he thought about it. And the next morning he was like, yeah, I think I want to do that. So that wound up being his undiscovered thing.
I,
You know,
I,
he
yes, I didn't know this story.
Yeah, I mean, he loved cross country. It was a new sport that he had never done, but never a runner before. Made some great friends and connections. Wound up being a leader on the team.
Yes,
And
yes.
this is the same child that went on to even explore running in college. And right now he's a leader with his college run club. It's really been a major part of his life and a large part of his adult fitness as well. He was also a pandemic senior. So his senior year was during the pandemic and the quarantine. And there was a bump, and the college admission that year was very difficult with all of the deferrals from the previous year. And I remember he was a little bit disappointed in what his prospects were for college. I said to him, isn't what you had planned. This is not what
Mhm.
you had expected. But I think it's going to be just like soccer. Like,
Yes.
you had all these plans of being on your high school soccer team, and you were disappointed, and he remembers he was, but it wound up being a door to something that was even better, that he
Yes.
didn't even realize was
Yes.
there, and honestly, when I said that statement to him, his entire mood and outlook was shifted 100%.
Oh, that's great.
And I think that previous quote unquote failure,
Yeah.
it is also coupled with the recovery from that failure.
Yes.
His decision the next day to say, you know what, I'm going to try cross country. I didn't drag him there. I didn't make him do that. That independent decision making and motivation of, yeah, I'm going to try that. And it wound up being one of the best things in his life. Failure and getting yourself up from a failure can lead to the next success. Let's move on. Let's take
Yes.
that risk. Let's bounce back from that, like you said, the stepping stone into something that may be even better.
Right. Right. It's like, I want you to take the risk fully knowing that sometimes you're going to fail, but you have to do that to find the success.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it starts with setting the parental mindset. We need, as parents, to remove our fears of our children failing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's the first step. All right. We've had this great discussion about the art of failure. And why don't we move on to summarize our points from today?
Okay. So, first off, this is a parenting podcast by pediatricians. And you and I have both had the privilege of counseling a lot of teens through depression, anxiety, even suicidality. And while those things are so multifactorial and so difficult, there are things that we can be doing as parents to help our kids establish a healthy mental health mindset. And I think failure and being willing to fail is one of those things that early on we can be establishing to help them have some healthy patterns later in life. That being said, when I summarize what we've talked about, the first half, we talked about this idea of the importance of letting them fail. Our role as parents is so much to protect them. But we talked about how failing can often inspire that intrinsic motivation that we want them to have. And it can also be a good teaching tool for developing executive functioning, which is something they need as they transition into adulthood. But we talked about how academics and grades, we need to be balancing that the culture of the school system strive for perfection and countering that at home with a narrative of, we're going to let you fail because this is part of how you're going to learn how you best study and how you best learn material. How are you going about the process of your education? And then the second half, we talked about this idea of encouraging them to fail, creating a culture in our home of failing is not necessarily bad. Failing is good. It means you tried something new. The hope is that our teens are willing to try new things and are not overly held back by worry that they may fail. And that if and when they fail, they have experiences from the past, like your son not making the high school soccer team, to draw on where they can look back and say, you know, I failed at this in the past and it turned out okay. So I am confident I can make it through failures in the future as well. In other words, there's not a fear of failure.
And like most of our topics on teens, it is so hard to have one recommendation, right? Each child and teen is different. Their situations are different, but this is hopefully some overarching advice. After today's discussion, I can think of several topics that I would love to discuss in future episodes. The teenage relationship, our advice on how to survive that college application process. And finally, high risk behaviors and activities, and how to counsel our children, how to be aware and what to do about that. So we hope that we can engage in some thoughtful discussions about these topics in the future.
Sounds good. I'm excited to delve into this further.
Great. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Vivian. We will see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.